She's an award-winning writer, a hunting guide, archery and rifle instructor, keynote speaker, and all-around outdoors woman who encourages you to get outside, hunt, fish, shoot, and savor all that life has to offer. And now, here's your host, Mia Anstein.
Hello and welcome to the Mac Outdoors podcast. If it's your first time here, I'm so happy that you have stopped by. And if you're a return listener, thank you for stopping again. Today, I have a friend and guest that we've been mentioning over the past couple of months. And we've talked about the NASC Summit, the National Assembly of Sportsmen's Caucuses. And today I have Ellary Tucker-Williams from the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation who presents the NASC Summit, and we're going to be talking a little bit about what we do with the Congress, and we also are going to be talking about some fun adventures because, heck, we know that sometimes it's not so much fun talking about legislation and bills and ballot initiatives and such, so we wanted to share some fun with you as well. We do have some great tips and advice and stories that I hope you will enjoy. As always, if you have anything to say, if you have comments, if you have tips, advice, I'd love to hear those. You can email me. The email address is contact@miaanstein.com. Or the Facebook is back up, so you can find Mia Anstein or Mac Outdoors on Facebook and Instagram, and Mia Anstein on almost all the other major and not so major social media outlets. Enjoy the show.
This winter, stay warm from head to toe with WSI Sports' heater gear layers. Use Leah's affiliate code, LLCO10, at WSISports.com and get 10% off your order. All products are proudly made in the USA. WSI Sports is bringing back pride in American-made clothing. That code once again, LLCO10 for 10% off at WSISports.com.
Today, I have a very special guest, and a lot of you have asked what the NASC Summit was because I've had several guests from that. And today, I have Ellary Tucker-Williams from the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation to share a little more about that with you. Good morning and hello, Ellary. Would you like to introduce yourself to my listeners?
Sure. Thanks, Mia. As Mia said, my name is Ellary Tucker-Williams. I'm the Rocky Mountain State's Assistant Manager for the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, and I'm also their Predator and Fur Bear Management Policy Lead. Within that role, I basically do state-level policy in the Rockies as it pertains to advancing and protecting hunting, fishing, trapping, and recreational shooting, as well as science-based wildlife and natural resource management. The Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation is a 501c3 organization that works at the state and federal levels of government to advance and protect hunting, fishing, trapping, recreational shooting. So under my portfolio, not only do I focus a lot on predator management and fur bear management, just given my region, but I cover 7 states in my portfolio, including Idaho, Montana, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming. So that's why me and I have gotten to know one another pretty good. And so very thankful to have someone like me engaged in Colorado and other issues in the region and nationally. You're a good one.
Yeah, and so we used to work with Andy Treharn, and I met him at the Capitol. I think the very first time I went to the Capitol, I met him, and I was really amazed because there was Sportsman's Day at the Capitol, and I live 6.5 hours on a good day, 6.5 hours from Denver and from the Capitol. And one year I was going to be up in the area during that time of the week. And I was like, oh, while I'm there, I'm going to make time to go and join all the sportsmen at the Capitol. And I was so excited because I thought I was thinking 100 people. I thought there'd be a lot of people. I was hoping 200. But I showed up there and I did meet Andy and Doug Vilsack, but there were 9 sportsmen there, including me. And I was like, wow, because a lot of them, they're very involved. And some of them actually, they were older and some of them don't travel as well anymore. I don't see them up there as often. But it was that day that I was like, I've got to be involved because no one else is showing up, like not everybody speaks for me. So I met Andy, but I didn't fully understand what you all do at the Capitol and you and in your group of states. So can you tell us what you do and how can sportsmen step up and help you? Because you have a big job.
Yeah, so it's multifaceted. So what we do at our different states is we primarily work with our sportsmen's caucuses. So our sportsmen's caucus, we have one in every state, so 50 sportsmen's caucuses across the nation. And it's essentially a group of like-minded legislators that are in line with our mission and support hunting, fishing, trapping, recreational shooting. So within those caucuses, we work primarily not only to advocate for bills that are going to advance that mission and to also advocate against bills that will hurt that mission. But the mass majority of what we do is really education. We try to educate our caucus members and members in the legislature to the role that hunters and anglers and trappers and recreational shooters play towards conservation. Lots of times that message is lost on folks that aren't necessarily directly engaged in those activities, or even folks that have been lifelong hunters or anglers that don't necessarily know the ins and outs on what happens on the back end and what that means for conservation, right? So educating folks to why hunters and anglers are so important to the conservation of our natural resources, what they contribute, and also the role that they play in managing wildlife under the guidance and the regulations of our state management authorities, our state fish and wildlife agencies. So trying to make sure that our legislators are educated on those matters. So when it comes time to vote, they can make an educated decision with how they vote. And then in addition to that, we also do a lot of events. We find that it's very effective, not only as a way to bring people together, because our caucuses are bipartisan and bicameral. So what that essentially means is we have members of both the House and the Senate, as well as members of both sides of the aisle. So the thought is to bring folks together over these issues, not divide us. So we try and do that through event hosting. It's really fun when you get folks all together at a trap range or at Sportsman's Day at the Capitol, eating wild game hot dogs and just kind of having that camaraderie and bringing folks together to show that there's more that unites us than divides us more often than not. And so trying to build that network and build those relationships, that way we can really work on good policy related to sportsmen and women issues, sports persons issues, as well as wildlife issues.
It's amazing to me that it has evolved into that. And I know I learned at the summit that you guys have all states. We have caucuses now where you guys are involved and working on these. And I just thought that was incredible. And it's exciting to me because I feel like we have a pool and we're gaining ground because we do have a huge opposition of people who just don't understand hunting and angling and the whole conservation aspect. What other things can we do to help you in that? Or is it a matter of just being somebody like me who gets involved in a conservation organization or a coalition or something like that?
I think it's all of the above, right? So there's varying levels of engagement that are all helpful. Not only is it like yourself, the folks that get involved in coalitions and take time out of their day to do these volunteer positions or to make sure that they're participating. If you have the time and the bandwidth and the desire to do that, that's absolutely wonderful and can be very, very helpful and very influential. Lots of times people don't have that bandwidth, right? Or they don't really have an interest in being engaged at that level, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a role to play. So when there's the opportunity not only just to voting for folks that are in line with your principles and your guidelines related to wildlife and sportsmen's issues is absolutely critical, because whether you like it or not, these folks are going to be making decisions at a legislative level on your behalf, right? So you want to make sure you have the right folks in those positions. And so just showing up and making an educated decision with who you vote for and taking a little bit of time to do your research is critical. There's also just staying engaged as far as educated on the different issues that are going on and having those conversations with not only members within your circle, but also taking opportunities to talk to folks outside of your circle. So much of what we do as sportsmen and women is communicating our message and communicating our story. And we have traditionally not been super great at that. as a community, we're getting better. I think we're doing a lot better job of it, and we've made some significant strides. But just within our own community and on social media and just how we talk about ourselves and what we do and the roles that we play, being able to communicate that in a way that resonates and can be heard by folks that aren't necessarily active members in our community is really, really helpful. So you don't necessarily have to be engaged on the policy side of things, but trying to change the minds and influence the perspectives and make sure your perspectives are understood and respected within different circles is really, really critical. And just taking folks fishing, taking folks to the range that have expressed interest. The more we can grow our base and the more that we can help folks have positive experiences related to our time-honored traditions and our passions, the better off that we're going to be when it comes time for voting, or it comes time for ballot initiatives or this, that, or the other, because then they have some experiences to fall back on. So you can get engaged directly. I mean, Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, for example, and how we host in Colorado Sportsmen's Day at the Capitol, that's a wonderful opportunity for folks to come in and participate and show their support and really demonstrate to our legislators that our community is one that needs to be taken into consideration and needs to be thoughtfully engaged. And there's also opportunities for public comment on different bills. And, if someone says this is a really important issue, like last year with our mountain lion bobcat hunting ban bill, the sheer volume of people that showed up was the deciding factor in us being able to stop that ban from proceeding through committee. And that right there in and of itself is an example of the importance of strategic engagement and really showing up, having the community show up when called upon. And that's kind of the stepwise function of folks like yourself that are engaged on kind of this more detailed level and being able to expand that message out to the masses more or less when need be. So I think it's good to have folks engaged at every level.
Right. And I 100% agree with you. I've seen it numerous times when we have these key issues that really are chomping away at pillars of conservation. And so that mountain lion, bobcat, and lynx, which really was a non-issue at the time, but those are keys that are going to just chip away at conservation. And I think, just like you talked about the ballot initiative, that one's huge. And right now it's what we're working on, at least on my forefront, is the cattlemen's. We're working on the wolf comment and such. Yep. And what I noticed just recently is in Gateway, Colorado, one of the past presidents of Cattlemen's, Janie Van Winkle, she rallied the cattlemen in the area, and there were over 100 people in the commission room to show their faces to the commissioners. And some of the commissioners actually said they were hugely impacted because it wasn't just dad that showed up. It wasn't, just everyone always talks about the old white guys, and I'm like, I'm not an old white guy, so I don't fit in that bucket. But there were children there. There were high school kids there. There were FFA students that said, I want to grow up and I want to run the ranch when my granddad passes away. And that really impacted the commissioners just to see that this affects families. Yep. And it's not just, it's not just affecting one old guy that's going to pass away. So if you can show up, that's what I've learned, is show up, whether you want to testify or not. You don't have to, but just being there and showing your face and that you care makes a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely.
And you mentioned sharing our stories and stuff like that. And I have fun following your adventures on social media because you've been doing some really cool stuff. And so I really wanted to ask you, what inspired you to start working for CSF? What was it originally, just on the policy side, or was it because of your background?
So my pathway to CSF was not planned. I initially starting out did not have a large interest in policy. I come from a science background, specifically human dimensions work. Got my master's from Auburn University in Alabama from the School of Forestry, Wildlife, and Environment. So human dimensions, for those who don't know, is basically the social science side of natural resource management. So how I kind of describe it in a quick phrase is, how do you better manage the people to manage the resource, right? Because we have our biological considerations, carrying capacities, population objectives, impact, all of these things. And then you have the human component, right? How many elk is too many elk? How many wolves is too many wolves? How many, is there not enough? Like how trying to understand the social side of things to better understand how conflicts may or may not arise and how to manage the resource to basically fit within the needs of the people, as well as the resource, so kind of marrying the two sides together. So that in and of itself had some pretty significant policy ties, but more from a research side of doing the data, doing the research, understanding how people would react to different issues, sharing that information, and then hoping that it gets incorporated into policy, right? But then through that research and those engagements, you can easily see how great policy can be when those things are taken into consideration, and also how not great policy can be when those things aren't taken into consideration, right? So then it really came apparent to me just how important policy is to natural resource management on multiple levels. And so when this job came available at CSF, it was something that I thought was a really wonderful opportunity to expand my skill set in an area that I didn't necessarily have a whole lot of experience, to make me a more well-rounded individual. But also the mission of it is something that is near and dear to my heart. I mean, I grew up hunting and fishing. I'm an adult onset big game hunter, but I grew up bird hunting and salmon fishing and crabbing off the coast of Washington State. And it's just been something that's been very important to me and my family for a very, very long time, and continues to be very important to me and my husband. And so it was a really wonderful opportunity for me to engage in policy in areas that I not only had my educational career path overlapped, but my personal perspective and my personal opinions really fell into it as well. So it was a really good fit in that regard. And then I could expand my skill set.
And it seems like the way you work, I mean, your job is a job, but it seems like the way you interact with your job is that you enjoy it, and you obviously have a care, and you have stake in the game. Yeah. It's not as though you just went and got a degree and then you found this job and you're trying to make it work. I can definitely tell that you have that in your background. So I was really curious about it, and it's cool to learn more about you since I've known you for a while, but we often don't get time to just chat and visit.
Yes, it's always work.
So, yeah, exactly. It's always like, what am I supposed to be doing? What should I say? What, where are we going? Where are we meeting? Yep. How are we going to get money?
Yep. Who's our enemy today? What are we doing?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it is fun to chat with you and learn. So this past year, like I said, I saw some of your cool adventures. Can you tell me, I mean, I don't know how many you had. I know I saw a couple of them, but what was your favorite adventure from the past year?
Man, that's hard. I would probably been on a lot of adventures this past year, as you said, all varying levels of engagement. But I would probably say my favorite adventure this year was my elk hunt with my husband. Uh-huh. That was on multiple levels just so rewarding. Like I said, I'm an adult onset big game hunter. My husband is the same way. Similar story. He grew up hunting and fishing, primarily birds. He kicks my butt at wing shooting. It's not even a comparison. So maybe that's why I like big game hunting, because I feel like I'm better than him at it. But wing shooting, he blows me out of the water. But it was his first elk ever, and only my second time ever going elk hunting. So the first time I went elk hunting was actually in Colorado for a cow elk with our mutual friend, Dan Gates, which was really wonderful. But that was my first endeavor into big game hunting with elk hunting. I had hunted whitetails in the Southeast, and I'd hunted whitetails in Wyoming, but for second time ever really going elk hunting. And we were really flying by the seat of our pants. I mean, I spent ungodly amount of time reading, all the how-to elk articles and picking the brains of friends and colleagues and poring over Onyx maps and identifying spots that we needed to hike into. And I'm hardcore. Like, I love backpacking and hiking and the quote unquote not fun parts of elk hunting, I really enjoy. Mm-hmm. So my husband, on the other hand, he'll go hiking and he'll do all those things, but he needs to have like a reward at the end. Like, it's like he's hiking for the purpose of hunting, right? But he's not going to just go hiking just for the fun of it, right? So it was pretty funny to like go out and be scouting and hiking for a purpose, but me being like, oh, gotta get the next knob, like that might be better than this one for glassing. And he's like, oh, we've done this like 8 times. Like, no, just one more. Just one more. But no, it was really wonderful, and it was really a culmination of a lot of scouting, a lot of work, a lot of mentorship, and a lot of people being willing to kind of share some of their experience in the area that we were hunting. It was a controlled elk unit. So my husband actually drew the tag. I didn't. That's a little bit of a sore subject, but that's fine.
It's the way it goes.
Yeah,
sometimes.
well, I'm a good wife, and I did all of the research and trying to figure out what units to apply for, draw odds, harvest odds. And I went down the data rabbit hole, so to speak. And I was like, okay, we're going to put in separately, because then it's, we got 2 chances, not just one as a group, playing the odds here, fully anticipating me being the one to benefit from that. And I was going to have my husband put it on his own. And I was like, he'll forget, he'll forget. And then I'll remind him, and then it'll be too late because he'll forget. So I'll just be a really good wife and put in for him. And then he, of course, draws the tag and I don't. So
So you got to be the guide on that.
So I basically got to do all of the stuff except pull the trigger, right? Which is great.
Yeah.
And so it was his first elk. Everything came together. Our scouting worked out great. Our spots that we had identified for glassing up places worked out perfectly. And at the end, we were successful and were able to pack it out, just him and I, back to our base camp from our backcountry camp. It just really was very rewarding, because not only was it something that he and I were able to do together and really like put together all of this information kind of for the first time, but it was 10 days that we got to spend in the woods with no cell phone service and hanging out, and that's a pretty big deal, especially with my job. And it was nice to just have that time together and really build some core memories with him in a way that doing something that we both really, really love, and to prove to ourselves that we could do it. So that one, which was huge. So looking forward to doing it again after we, finished packing out his elk and finally got back to camp at like 1 a.m. And, there's always that terrible pack out story where it's uphill both ways and all this different stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I can remember we got back to camp, laid down, finally could like relax because everything was in the freezer and all that. And I'm just sitting there thinking, man, I can't wait to do this again. Like like if I had another tag, right? If I had a tag and we had to go back to that same spot and do it all over again, like count me in, I'll do it again tomorrow. And he's laying there and he goes, that was really great, but in the future, we should do this with quads and mules.
So I have horses and I appreciate them whenever I have a big pack out. My big bull that I got in one of the limited areas here, we had the horses the whole entire time, but where the elk, it was an archery hunt, and where the elk actually fell was down in the hellhole. And we have a lot of beetle kill. And so I couldn't get the horses down there. I could have tried, but I really didn't want to lame up a horse, so it was all about us. And my husband ended up, I would debone the meat and put it in a pack, and he'd carry it up while I was deboning the next quarter. And it wasn't that far of a pack out, but it was definitely like, I do appreciate my horse quite a bit.
It was very funny because, I was like, man, I loved it, right? Like the terrible, like the pain of, I loved it. Just, it made me feel very empowered. Right.
Right.
But then he was just like, man, if we could do this again, but not with horses or mules or quads, that would be ideal. So I always give him a hard time about that, but it was a really wonderful experience for him and I to really put it all together and do it as a team. Yeah.
And it's so interesting that that's the adventure you chose, because I was very curious which one you were going to pick. And my daughter, Leah, that you have met, she said, ask her about her elk hunt. So I'm glad that that's what you chose, because she'll just have to listen to this episode. But when you were talking about preparing for this, so you visited with friends, what?
For the love of the outdoors, open spaces, and mountains, shop www.mia.limited/one. The Mac Outdoors Mountains Are Calling series of apparel is perfect for you or your loved ones. Support the channel and shop now. www.mia.limited/one.
Idaho.
Did you
So
hunt in?
our unit was
Idaho.
basically kind of right on the border, southeast corner of Idaho, kind of along the border of Wyoming. We weren't that far from Wyoming.
Yeah. Okay. And you did some research on gear. Did you have to go spend a bunch of money and buy a bunch of gear, or did people loan you gear, or you already had it?
We bought some, but we had most of it. So from our other hunting adventures, we had basically all the basics. And like I said, I've done a lot of backpacking. So we had the tents, and we had the stoves, and we had the backpacking gear. I'd say the main purchase that I'm really glad that we did was specifically we bought one of those KUIU meat hauling backpacks, which was absolutely critical in us being able to pack out the elk, and it made it significantly easier on us. So that was probably the main thing that we had to buy. Carranza, my husband decided that his elk hunt was the perfect quote unquote excuse that he needed to buy a new firearm. So that was something that he did. Had been wanting to buy a 6.8 Western for a long time, and he was going to do it eventually, but this was the little carrot that he needed to be like, oh, gotta buy a new gun.
Now I have to have it.
Terrible. But he
That's
didn't
awesome.
need to, right? He wanted to. But most of the stuff that we had as far as gear wise, we basically already had, with a couple exceptions. And again, we didn't necessarily need those backpacks. We had other backpacks that would have worked, but it just would have made it a little bit more painful.
One thing that I will mention for you and for the listeners is it's good that you already had camping gear, and you can actually go to mountaineering stores and get hunting equipment. You don't have to go to a hunting store to get hunting equipment, because I actually find a lot of the quality stuff is at those mountaineering stores. But there's also an organization, a company, it's called Check Outside, and you can rent those meat packs. And so you're not having to buy it if you don't want to. You guys are obviously going to continue elk hunting, so you made a good investment there.
Right.
But they'll rent meat packs, cots, pads, spotting scopes, binoculars, all of it. They'll rent to you pretty much everything except for the firearm. You can't rent the firearm from them, but that's a way, if you don't quite have the money to make a big purchase, you can go rent them. And it's easy way to get a little bit extra gear or borrow from friends.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I will say, being that Carranza and I have been so engaged in hunting activities since childhood, we have definitely accumulated a lot of things over the years, and there's always, Christmas wish lists, and people are asking what you want for Christmas and your birthday, and more often than not, there's gear on there that we have listed. And so it's definitely not something that just happened overnight. It's definitely been years of accumulation of stuff.
Right.
And for example, we have all sorts of hunting gear, right? And I always joke that when people tell me to dress warm for something, they better be ready for a bunch of camo, because it's my warmest attire.
Right.
And so I have some friends from undergrad that are actually coming out to Hawaii here coming out to Idaho here pretty soon, that are actually born and raised Hawaii. And they're coming out to Idaho for a long weekend, and we're going to have some fun, but they want to go ice fishing, right? And so anyone that's gone ice fishing knows that it can be very, very cold.
Yep.
And you generally, the toes are the first things to go, right? And so I was just like, man, they're not going to have the right gear. So I'm looking through all of my stuff, right? And I'm like, oh, I have enough between my husband and I that they're going to be just fine. So it's definitely your point to having that network and those folks that you can reach out to borrow things and to figure out, if you like it, because it's a big commitment to buy all of that gear just to try something, right? So once you figure out that you like it, or you figure out, I want to buy, hunting gear, but I want to try it out first to see if I like it, willing to spend the money on it. That's a significant help to someone that might be new to it, that doesn't have the traditional upbringing as like myself.
And so if you had to suggest one piece of gear for ice fishing What's the one thing, or what kind of boots are you wearing to keep your toes warm? Because that's, for me, it's my toes. I've recently shared a video about some mittens that one of my photographer friends told me about that I'm in love with. Like I take them everywhere, and they're very expensive though,
Yeah.
and like you said, trying them out. Being media, I do have the opportunity to get things to try for, and I'll write about them in articles and such like that.
Mhm.
But for somebody who doesn't have that opportunity, what boots are you using? How are you keeping your toes warm?
So I recently bought, I think they're called Baffin boots. I think they're out of Canada, because I went to Iceland with my mom right after Christmas. And so I knew that I needed to make sure that my toes were extra warm, being that it's Iceland. So I bought these Baffin boots, insulated, basically kind of look like, your traditional snow boot. But with that, I also purchased electric socks and heated insoles.
Both.
Well, because I didn't know, right? Because I was like, man, I don't know, like, how well these socks are gonna work. Like, do insoles work better? I don't know. I've never had like automatic socks. My toes are just cold. That's just how it goes.
Yeah.
And so, and I tried those out, and I tell you what, I was like, this is a game changer. Electric socks, battery powered. They seem to be bulky, but they're actually not. Like, it 100% changed my life, and understanding that I didn't have to just deal with cold toes. And even having like the electric socks as the base layer of my footwear, and then having like a thick wool sock over those to really warm them up and keep them warm. Oh, I was set. So that's going to be what I have my friends and even myself do when we go ice fishing, is everyone's going to either have electric socks or heated insoles to maintain a level of warmth and to keep the frigidness of the ice away.
Yeah. No, I know what I'll be wearing in the waterfowl blind now. Did you get the rechargeable socks or the ones that have a little battery pack?
The rechargeable battery pack.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
And did you end up using the insole or just the socks?
Just the socks. I'll probably try the insole. I didn't need to do both, thankfully. That would have probably been a little much. It would have been some sweaty feet. But no, it was a game changer. I mean, we went, I used them when we went, I did a sled dog tour. So I was, on the back with a bunch of huskies in the front, pulling mom and I around with our guide. And obviously, like, my feet are just being doused in snow the whole time. And the electric socks with my boots kept my feet warm, and I didn't get numb toes, and I was astounded.
That's so cool, because that's the first thing that gets cold on me is my feet.
Yep.
And the more I bundle, you just said like your feet sweat. The more I sweat, then I'm cold, and it doesn't matter. So warm toes is always a good thing. And riding behind the huskies is what I thought you were going to say was your favorite adventures, but you did write about your elk hunt. So on Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, on the website, you guys kind of have a blog, because I think that's where I read about your elk hunt.
Yeah, I did just a little nod to Kranz's and my experience, but also the importance of mentorship and having a connection. Like I said, I grew up hunting and fishing, so I didn't need someone to necessarily introduce me. I'm already bought in, right? I'm already a sports person. I'm committed for life, right? But to expand my skill set and to expand the different seasons that I partake in, it's very helpful just to have a starting point, and having someone being able to help narrow your focus, or even just point you in the right direction. Like, I can do the research, I can figure it out, but when you give me an entire unit in a part of the state that I have minimal, if no experience in, like just randomly picking a spot on a map that looks good, that could mean everything. It could be great, or it could be absolutely incorrect. And you just you don't know, right? So just having someone to just gently guide you in a direction, like, you'll probably be successful if here's some areas that I would look at and say, like, I have been successful previously in this area, or I have had friends that have been successful in this general area. take your time, take your scouting weekends and explore them and pick whichever one fits you that you like, but helping to just point someone in the right direction is just critical at all stages of a sports person, whether that be someone new to it or someone that's been in it and is just looking to expand their repertoire. I mean, same thing with turkey hunting. I didn't grow up turkey hunting. First time I went turkey hunting was with my brother in Eastern Washington, and then I went with Mac with Montana Outfitters and Guides last year in Montana, and now I feel confident in my skill set that now I'm probably going to try and guide my husband on his first turkey. So it's this repeat fashion where Ellary figures out what to do and then she kind of drags her husband along. So
and hopefully he's enjoying it the whole way.
oh, he does. He loves it because like, oh, I'll just wait for you to do it a couple times and then you can take me and then we can do it together and it works out. We all benefit.
That's so cool because so we used to be outfitters full time. We had a full-blown outfitting company and we've greatly scaled back over the years. But I would go on guided hunts. And one of my editors one time asked me, like, you're an outfitter. Why would you book a guided hunt? And it wasn't in Colorado, it was in another state. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned all the scouting. And that's the thing. It's like, well, I don't have the time or money to go back and forth and scout and try to figure this out. So I'm hiring the outfitter to help me with that aspect of it. So it's good that you had people in the area that could point you in directions. Oh, so you weren't just wandering around aimlessly. Because I actually have had some men that contacted me over the years that were like, told me about their experiences and, in it parked in a parking lot in the middle of nowhere and not knowing what to do. And, it's like, having a mentor is so important. And even if it's a friend, or one time we got a tip from a guy at a liquor store, like, oh, we'll go up this draw or that draw, okay. Yeah. Like they might be sending you on a wild moose chase, or you might be actually going to go find a moose.
Yeah. You never know. And 100%. And it's very lovely because I think it also speaks to the community that we are all a part of, right? Like we want people to have positive experiences. And if you have, I think there's a lot of research out there that basically says like, if your first experience is a good one, then you're willing to kind of put up with some of the experiences that might not necessarily be as great or as successful because you had that initial step that was successful and kind of set the bar. So then your willingness to kind of maintain and sustain in those activities is significantly higher. Because if you first time you go turkey hunting or elk hunting and you're cold and you don't see anything and you don't hear anything and you just if you just have a bad experience, then it's gonna,
your truck is stuck, your flat tire, like
you forget your boots, whatever, it doesn't necessarily set you up for wanting to be a consistent member of the community, and we need folks that want to be engaged in a part of it and in it for the long haul as much as possible. So making sure that they have a positive first experience is huge in that journey.
So with CSF or separate from CSF, do you guys have some like upland hunts or any mentoring things planned for the coming year?
Not yet. So my husband and I actually have a baby bird dog at home. So we're trying to get her just figuring out what she's supposed to do. Yeah, she's just trying to get her on some birds and just trying to get her out and about and just figuring out how to be a bird dog. She loves birds and wants to, be as engaged as she can, but just trying to teach her how to do it right. So we're going to be reaching out to a lot of our friends with just tips and tricks on where to go to just get her into some birds, and less about harvesting and more about just trying to get her experience. So I think a big part of our coming year is going to probably be a lot based on trying to get her situated. And then I'm going to put in for a controlled elk hunt again, and hopefully Carranza doesn't snake my tag. But I'm looking at wanting to do a bear hunt this year. I've never done a spring bear hunt. It's on my list. So that will be another one where I'm probably going to pour over a lot of data and try and pick the brains of some folks on where to go or what to do. But I've had some really wonderful experience. Like I mentioned, I've had some really wonderful experiences, and just wanting to expand on those and understand all the different facets of the outdoor sporting community, not just the parts that maybe my family grew up doing. Will I become a lifelong bear hunter? I don't know. Maybe I might thoroughly love it. Maybe I won't. I don't know. But I want to at least try it, and I want to at least figure it out and be able to have that experience to be able to draw on, particularly with my job, because of so much of what we do is predator management and engagement, but also just trying to understand where everyone is coming from within our community, to me, is very, very important.
Yeah, and that's so important for everyone. I wish more people who don't understand would take the time to try to learn. And you mentioned education over and over. And that's basically why I started my podcast, was try to educate people who want to be hunters. A lot of people who are trying to figure out where to go and what to do, they listen to the show. And then there's experienced people that like to see the good things that are going on in our community and how to influence others. They listen as well. So it's a really great audience. That my whole thing is every day we try to learn something on the Mac Outdoors podcast. So thank you for teaching with us. I did have one other question. So most of the things that you guys are hunting, are you eating all of them, or what do you what do you plan to do with the bear?
If I am lucky enough to be successful, I will absolutely be eating it. I will need to brush up on some recipes because I have never tried it. I've heard great things from numerous people that I consider friends and colleagues and very much respect. And I don't think that they would lead me astray at all.
Yeah.
I've heard great things about using bear fat for baking.
Yep.
I am not a super experienced baker, but I am willing to give it a go and just to kind of try it and figure it out. But no, absolutely. I mean, we've been eating on our elk, since we brought it home. We eat everything. We have a couple frozen birds in the freezer right now that we aren't going to eat, strictly because we're trying to train our dog. But other than that, no, everything we hunt, we eat, and anything we catch and keep, we eat. And most of the fly fishing and stuff that we do in Idaho, most of it's just catch and release. But we do obviously keep some of it when we want to, and we know we're going to eat it. But no, absolutely.
So
definitely going to eat it.
If you do get lucky, draw the tag first. And then if you get one, I do have some recipes also. So I'd be happy to share some recipes with you. And you talked about predators. I actually have bobcat recipes, mountain lion recipes.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you ever want some of those too, I can share them with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have had mountain lion a couple times, and every time I've just been so pleasantly surprised. I didn't know what to expect. Right? Mm-hmm. Never had it. You don't know. Same thing the first time you have venison. You don't know what to expect, right? And every time I've had mountain lion, I have been pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
And
most of it's all in how you handle it, how you cook it. And if that's all good, then most of the wild game is good as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Before you go, do you have any tips or a fun fact for the listeners? Any tips for getting outdoors just in general, or if you know a wildlife fact that you've learned over the years, maybe a fact about hunting or the North American model, anything like that?
Oh man.
I'm putting you on the spot.
I know there's so many things running through my brain that I can't even focus on one. Tips or tricks. I mean, I'll share one that was a recent one that was shared with me that actually worked out really well. So I'll give a little bit of backstory. So Kranz and I have two god kids. They're both young, I think like 5 and 4, roughly around those age. And they were down in Idaho for Thanksgiving with their parents, and they both want to hunt and fish. That's all they ever talk about. The little girl, Bree, will come up to me and she says, "We're going to go turkey hunting." And I said, "Girl, you let me know whenever you're ready and your parents say it's okay, we'll go turkey hunting." And then the older boy, T, he has his little camo backpack, and he goes, and I go, what's your favorite meat to eat? He goes, elk. And I say, "Have you ever eaten elk?" And he goes, "No, but it's my favorite." And so, so they came down and I cooked him elk, and he was just so excited to finally be eating elk, and it's his favorite meat and all this stuff. And Bree was talking very much about how she wanted to go fishing. And that's just, she kept talking about how she wants to go fishing, and she wants all this. So we connected with one of our friends and local tackle shop owners about, the best way to get 2 young kids a fish, the first time fishing. Their parents aren't active in the hunting and fishing realm, but for whatever reason, whether it's because of Kansas and my involvement or just TV shows that they watch, I don't know, but they want to be sports people, and their parents have been very wonderful and basically saying, like, take them, do it, embrace it. Like, we don't know anything about this, but if you can cultivate this in them, by all means, please do. So talking to our tackle shop friend about, how do you get a 5-year-old a fish in a quick enough time to maintain their attention span, but also it's late November and it's cold, and I don't want them to get cold and have a bad first experience, right? So all these things, right? But I also want to cultivate this spark, right? And so talking to him, and he goes, you know what, Ellary? He goes, this is what you do. This is what I've done with all of my kids. He goes, you got to make it fun, but you got to make it short, right? You got to really fully take advantage of the fact that they're not going to last all day. So he says, keep them warm, give them lots of snacks. And when you catch a fish, just because we went to like a stocked pond, right, with these little trout. And so they're there to be caught there. It's not like wild fish or anything of this nature, right? It's a game and fish stock pond, just like a mile down the road from our house. So you're going to catch fish. Let the first kid reel it in, right? Have a ball. Then one of you distracts the kids, right? Because you got to make sure it's even, right? Because you don't want one little kid catching a fish and not the other little kid, right? Because then that's a whole nother element that you just deal
One
with.
loves it, one hates it.
Right. And then there's crying because brother caught a fish and I didn't catch a fish, and it's just a whole thing, right? And so he says, then you get the one reel in the fish. You take the pictures. Then you distract them with the other pole, right? What's going on? And you throw the fish back in the water, but leave it on the hook. And then you leave it out there, and you're just letting them do their thing. They're all excited. One of them caught a fish, all this. And then you wait a little while and you go, oh, I think there's a bite. Well, I think you caught another fish. You let the other one reel in the same fish. And then they both have a fish. They're both ecstatic. You've cut down on your fishing time. You've done it in an hour or whatever, right? And then you pack up and you go home because they both caught a fish, short enough time frame. They didn't get cold. They had their fun snacks. They had a great time, and they had a positive experience. And you don't have to deal with one catching a fish and one not. So that's a tip that I got from a tackle shop owner that has done a lot of young kid fishing.
That's a great tip.
When he told me, I was like, that is genius, because in my mind it's like, you catch a fish, you let it go, and then maybe you're lucky enough that you catch another one really quickly, or maybe you go all day and you don't catch another one, and then you have this little kid here who's cold and you want to make sure that they get a fish, but then they start not having a good time, and then you're not having a good, and it's just, if you can rig it a little bit, it helps in the long run.
Awesome tip. Well, do you want to give any shout outs to either your social media or outlets, or to CSF social media or outlets?
Yeah, for anyone that's interested in kind of tracking or getting involved with the Congressional Sportsmen Foundation, we have a lot of different ways to do that. We have our social media on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Congressional Sportsmen Foundation. It's pretty good. We do a lot of stuff posting on there, updates on policy and things going on, but also on our website at the congressionalsportsmen.org. We have all sorts of things that you can sign up for that are free products to the public. We have our newsletter. We send out weekly newsletters to give you a feel of all the different things going on across the country, as well as opportunities for engagement. We also have what's called Tracking the Capitals, which is a free service that we provide where folks can go in and actually select for different policy topics, states, things of that nature, to be able to track policy. So, for example, if you live in Colorado and you care about predator management, for example, or access and opportunity, or, there's a whole list of different topics. You can actually go into that program and select your criteria, and you'll get emails to anything that pops up within that specific criteria. So it's a really good way to track things, to kind of narrow the focus to what your interests are. But again, that's free to the public. What else do we have? We also have all sorts of different resources on our website on different topics and issues that are very helpful for anyone that wants to learn about different topics, or also just kind of see what's the different things that we're working on. And also there's some opportunities if anyone thinks that this job sounds like something they might want to do. We actually have a couple openings doing policy work right now. So if you are interested, I definitely would suggest you to go check out our website and look at those jobs and apply if you think you'd be a good fit. We're always looking to expand our team.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for making the time to visit with me today and to share so much knowledge with my listeners. I really appreciate it. And I will see you soon at the Capitol before we know it.
I know. Next month we will be down in Denver.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Mia. Thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Hey, this is Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, host of the Armed Lutheran Radio podcast, reminding you that the podcast you're listening to is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out all the great content at selfdefenseradio.net.